Welcome to the Table Podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to The Table, the podcast where student-like professionals, educators, and change makers come together to share stories, insights, and ideas for building communities where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson. I'm excited to welcome Lisa Riegel to the show. Lisa has taught at the secondary, post-secondary, and graduate level, and she's the author of NeuroWell and her new book, hot off the presses, Aspirations to Operations. She specializes in helping schools develop what she calls a NeuroWell culture, using brain science to create emotionally safe environments that promote greater staff and student happiness, health, and success. Today, we're talking about how understanding neuroscience and neuroplasticity can transform the way we lead, teach, and build truly inclusive learning communities. Welcome to the show, Lisa. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And so, Lisa, you've worked across so many different levels of education, secondary, post-secondary, and graduate school. What drew you to focus specifically on brain science and its application in educational settings?
Well, I think part of it is when I was a teacher and an administrator in the K-12 space, I was always really interested in the at-risk students and, the students who really just don't do school and figuring out ways to engage them, ways to make them feel happy and healthy and ready for success. And then when I went and did my doctoral work, I focused on leadership, but I was more interested in the human system as opposed to the policy side. So I really started digging in. And as I was teaching in the principal licensure course at Ohio State, I taught several of those courses. And there was just a lot of focus on structure, on org theory. And there just wasn't a whole lot about people. And I had the experience of having good leaders, and I've had really horrible leaders, and I've had sort of not so good leaders. And so I was like, the real differentiator is their ability to work with people. And so that got me even more interested. And then I started to dive into some work in the education space for special education. And again, we focus so much on the structure, on the time and the IEP, but the quality and really addressing the underlying data that explains what's going on in the brain. Leaders just don't have that information. And I've been consulting in schools for a long time, 15 years or more. And I've kind of become the guru for helping them to come up with solutions for kids who are rough, who are not your typical student. And I was like, change starts in the brain. And if we understand the brain, all of a sudden, some of these weird policies that we do around discipline or behavior management, or even our teaching practices, all of a sudden we look at them through that lens and we go, this is why it's not working. So if we can apply the brain science, we can be more productive and efficient. And maybe everybody wouldn't be so burned out and overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love the fact that you started this conversation talking about the people and relationships. And I feel like people are starting to think about that more. But, as leaders, it was more about kind of getting the job done and not kind of like the people that are involved are helping you get that job done. And so that's something that I think we should be talking about a lot more.
Yeah. Well, and we have a real problem with teacher recruitment and retention as well. And, it's ironic to me because education is such a human industry.
I know.
We're not taking care of the humans in the system.
Not taking care of the humans. So, can you explain what you mean by NeuroWell culture? Because I love that phrase. What does that look like in practice when you walk into a school or an organization that's really embraced that approach?
Yeah, so there's three components to the framework. And the first is that schools need to be safe. And that safety, we think of it through physical safety, but it's really about emotional safety and
Psychological safety. Yep.
Yeah, and that intellectual piece, if you have kids who are behind and they're in your class, then, that zone of proximal development that we talk about, it's like if I walk into a class and every day I'm lost and I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm not intellectually safe. And we've been talking about differentiation for 20 years, but when I go into classrooms, I don't really see differentiation. I still see a lot of teacher-led instruction to an entire group of students. And so that's really the first component is how can we set up routines and practices and teaching strategies that establish emotional and intellectual safety. The second is really being supportive. So power sharing, instead of it's, I'm the boss and you're my subordinate and you need to comply. Thinking about how do we help kids understand they're part of a learning community, and
Mm,
how do we build our classrooms around that idea that it's not about you, it's about us and
right.
we have a collective goal to learn in here. So what do we do to support each other in that? And then the final one's being proactive. And I always laugh when I go to elementary schools. I'm always like, so can we predict that kids are going to roll around the carpet and poke themselves? And teachers are always like, yeah. And I'm like, well, then why are you angry when they do it? Right?
Right.
Like, we know what's going to happen. So why aren't we
Right.
proactive and preparing for it? So really it's about that. And it's really all kind of steeped in having some culture shifts and some
Mm,
mindset shifts that behavior, whether it's academic or social behavior, and this is for adults and kids, is
sure.
the intersection between our biology and our context. So when we understand the biology, we reframe the problems. And when we reframe them through a biological lens, our solutions change and they work. And then the second piece is the context. We have control over that. We can
Yeah,
make school a place that's a happy, healthy, successful place to be. And that's not
absolutely.
what I see. And so I'm trying to get
Absolutely.
people to do a little bit of a mind shift, and also to think, one of the most devastating things I think that happened in education was when we tied teacher quality to student test scores, because teachers shifted from teaching students to teaching content.
Exactly.
We've left the human out of the system, and those achievement gaps are not closing, and it's not working because we have to address the humans in order to make change.
Yep, it is not working. So, we talked about a neuroworld culture, but for our listeners who might not be familiar with neuroscience in general, can you explain why understanding how the brain works is crucial for educators and student life professionals, but also I think for people in general, honestly. But
Yeah.
let's start there.
Sure. And one of the things I really hope and I promote is that when you understand your brain, then you have better self awareness. When you have
Right.
self awareness, you have the ability to self regulate. And when you have self awareness and self regulation, you have self control. So it really becomes it's an additive benefit with each of them. So the two main things that I talk about that are really important to brain science, the first is how we form perceptions. And
Hmm.
so when we throughout our whole life we have experiences, and our brain, 80% of our traffic in our brain is below our nose and it's unconscious, and that part of the brain is literally just keeping us alive. Its
Mm,
job is to look for danger, and when there's danger, to get us safe and to
got it.
monitor our systems. So but that's where perceptions are formed in this limbic part of our brain. It doesn't know time and it can't tell a story. So the sensory associations that our brain makes in that limbic system are really important. So, like if you're selling your house, they'll say, burn a candle that smells like cookies. The reason for that is because unconsciously we don't think, oh, this smells like cookies. That reminds me of my grandma. I want to buy this house. It's all unconscious. But what it does is that when we smell that smell, our emotional reaction is comfort and our body relaxes. So we
Mm,
actually relax in that moment. And then we look around and we say, I feel comfortable in this place. So those folders form through our experiences throughout our life. When we make a perception, our brain, our thalamus in our brain, limbic system, doesn't know time, can't tell a story, looks
hmm.
around and it takes in all the sensory information in the environment, what we hear, see, smell, touch, everything. And what it does is it goes into our sensory memory folder and it looks for associations that this is like that. Because if every single experience in our life was brand new and novel,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
we have to rely on patterns. But the problem is that some of those sensory associations are faulty. And so, like, for example, for me, I get super dysregulated if I'm late. Like, I
Mm,
can't stand being late. I get very anxious about that.
uh-huh.
The association in my brain that has led to that anxiety is that my parents were divorced. When I was like 8 years old, I spent a lot of time on the front stoop waiting for my dad because he was serially late, always late. And so my little 8-year-old brain attached love and worth to time.
The time,
It's a faulty association, but it's in there.
but
And
it's
so,
yours
yes,
for at least for right now.
yeah, and by having that self-awareness, I can understand why I feel frustrated when I'm late. And because I have that self-awareness, I can have the top of my brain, which is where I live, my personality. This part of the brain is what makes you you. The rest of it's just
Hmm.
keeping you alive. I can say, this is not that. If you're running late, I don't think she doesn't care about me. I can reduce the stress that's there by saying, this is not that. She's running late. We're fine. It's going to be a fun night. And so I can proactively reduce the stress. Likewise, I can be proactive. So I leave early so that I'm always on time so I don't have to have discomfort from being late. We have a lot of people that have no understanding of the triggers and they just let their emotions drive their bus. And so perceptions, I always say it's kind of like having a banana. A banana is reality. And then you have
Uh-huh.
this like spaghetti strainer, which represents those filters and those associations. So the thalamus of your brain grabs all that sensory data, the banana, pulls out the filters that seem like this is like that, and runs the banana through those filters. Well, if I pushed a banana through a colander, it comes out squished on the other side.
Right.
It's still a banana, but it looks different. And
Hmm.
so understanding that our reality is not our perception of reality, that that is clouded by our entire history and how our brain has chosen to associate different sensory things in our environment. When teachers understand that, it really reframes the problem, because I see teachers get into conflict and escalate conflict in students and take things personally and get angry. And
Yeah.
and if you understand the perception piece, you can keep your professional hat on instead of putting on your personal hat and getting hurt. Instead, you can say, okay, there's something in this context right now that is dysregulating that student. And
Right.
maybe it's a fear under that. So, like, I don't like being late, but it's not about lateness. It's about the fear of unloved or the fear of not belonging. So understanding this kid is having a reaction in my class because they don't feel like they can do it. And it's playing into an association of how they feel when they disappoint their mom, or when they're, feeling dumb, or maybe they had siblings that told them they were dumb all their life.
Hmm.
So understanding that what is happening now is the product of our entire past. And if we have
Entire
that
past.
self-awareness, we can regulate and we can control how we respond to situations in a more thoughtful way instead of the unconscious part of our brain taking over. So
Yeah, I love that. And that's, something that we really should spend a lot more time talking about, because it not only happens in schools, but it happens just in everyday life, right? You
yeah,
see, and just your interactions with people, you're like, you make an assumption on why a person is having a response to you or coming in with an attitude or not X fill in the blank. And it's could be for lots of other different reasons than the one that we see on the surface. And so
exactly.
being curious about that, and taking a moment to identify, oh, they may be having a moment, but we can't, like you said, you can't do that unless you've been able to do that for yourself.
Right.
And we don't spend a lot of time doing that for ourselves. So in your work, when you talk about creating emotionally safe environments, and so what are you think the biggest barriers you see that prevent schools and organizations from achieving this? I think we just answered that, but I think it's important to repeat. And how can leaders start breaking down those barriers?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is that we don't know how the brain works. It's like the science of reading is all the rage now because we finally got the information. That's not new. The brain didn't
Right.
change. That's how our brain learns to read. And look at how many decades we were not aligned with that. And we were
Right.
struggling to get reading scores up. So it's the same thing with behavior, like to understand. And I think sometimes it's that mind shift for educators to say, okay, if I recognize the brain science, then what I also recognize is that the part of the human that I'm working with that makes them, that has their character and their morals and all of these things, this part of the brain is not driving the bus when they are
Right.
emotionally dysregulated. And so I'm judging them on an animalistic brain. I'm judging their actions on a part of their brain that is meant to keep them alive. And I think that mind shift has to occur in order for people to be open to change. And I think once they do make that shift, all of a sudden they look at how they do behavior plans or how they
Mhm.
do discipline, or even the
Yeah.
idea that, like, if they understand biology as behavior and context, the intersection. If I throw a kid out of my room and that kid goes to the principal or the guidance counselor and is regulated and talks through what went on, then comes back into my room, the context is different. So now they're
Right.
going to escalate again. So we have to teach kids to calm down in the context that they're going to be in. And I see that all the time. You get this revolving door, and then the kids are always in the principal's office. So they're missing
Right.
instruction. They come back, they're not in a safe. It just becomes this
Yes.
hamster wheel.
So we haven't talked about technology at all and social media, and they have such a huge impact on mental health and executive functioning, especially for students. What are the most critical things educators and student life professionals need to understand about that relationship.
Yeah, so there's two big things. One is that it is a context that the kids live in that shapes those filters in their brain and shapes their
Hmm.
worldview. So, like when I was a kid, I used to watch like Little House on the Prairie and
Yeah, it was my favorite.
yeah, wholesome shows. You made a mistake, you owned up to it. You were about community and family and good morals, and that was the worldview that we were inundated with our media. Kids
Right.
today watch shows where it's like, hey, you and I can get together and manipulate her and vote her off the island. Or, it's all about power and manipulation and othering and kicking people out. And they've grown up with that worldview. And so that media, and then on top of that social media, which we all know the negative algorithms are boosted, so they,
Yes.
they have a skewed worldview that people are not kind, the world is chaotic, and so we already have a perception problem for kids. So the one problem is the contextual factors, and one other contextual factor that's not media but has a big impact is our medical system. I mean, if you
Mm.
watch TV today, everybody
Uh-huh.
has skin disease or erectile dysfunction or diabetes. So it's like everybody's diseased or sick and we need a pill. And kids are so diagnosed right now with so many different mental health concerns. And I would argue that there are some that are truly, dealing with a mental health condition. There's a lot
Sure.
of others who just don't know how to deal with discomfort. And when we go to the doctor and we say, I'm anxious all the time, the doctor says, well, you have anxiety. And then they prescribe medication. And then the kid,
Yeah.
this label of I have social anxiety, and that becomes a filter. So now you're looking at a kid who's taking in all that environmental information and they're
Hmm.
running it through the world is dangerous, people are mean, I am diseased, something is wrong with me, and then their perception is negative. And so that's a really big
Jeez.
problem. Yeah. The
It
other
is. And like you think about that and think about like just being an adolescent alone is hard enough, right? But then you add all
right.
those factors in to what students are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so thankful to not be a child right now.
You and me both. It's not a good time to grow up. And then the other thing you mentioned was technology. And you look at like when you and I were growing up, we memorized phone numbers and
Yeah.
addresses. And we had to understand like kind of spatial awareness to know I have to go up 2 blocks and over a block. We don't have to do any of that anymore because technology
Not
does
at
it,
all.
which is great, except the downside that educators have not dealt with is that we don't develop the mental capacity and thinking skills that were required to do that. So we have low working memory, we have low information processing. If I had a question as a kid, I went to a library and I looked up
Right.
and I navigated a spatial area and I went and
Yeah.
skimmed and I pulled main ideas out. And that's stuff that teachers are struggling to get kids to be able to read and comprehend. And, now I just ask my phone. So it's great. But what we are doing is we're cognitively offloading our executive functions to technology. And there's two
Right.
major problems that happen. One is that we need those for academic success. But the other one that I think is kind of a bigger philosophical problem is that this part of our brain is the animal, right? We share it with everybody, keep us alive. This part of the brain is what makes us human with
Mm.
character and morals. And if we continue to cognitively offload that part of our brain and it doesn't develop, what happens to humanity? And you think about even with
Oh,
AI, they've been studying cognitive offloading and they're showing that it has a huge negative effect on our executive functions, even just a little bit of AI. So again, I love AI, I use it, it's fine, but
yeah.
I have all these other experiences that have built those neural pathways in my executive
Right.
function. So schools have to close that gap. They have to figure out how to teach those kinds of things because in a post AI world, kids don't need content. They can get that anytime they want.
Anywhere.
They
Hmm.
they need to fill the gap between AI and the outcomes that an organization wants. They got to find the human capacity in there, and we're not strategically teaching that. So part of a NeuroWell culture is teaching kids to think and be self-aware.
Right, and but schools have never, I mean, shouldn't say they've never taught that, but it was we had to learn those things as a function of, being in society, right? And so
Right.
now that we've taken that piece away, schools haven't said, okay, now we need to teach those things. We've just kind of plowed forward or kept going ahead. And so, I always say, schools are like education like the Titanic. Like they move. Change is not something that happens very quickly. But I thought that with after COVID, because people had to pivot so quickly, that
Yeah.
things would change and be a little bit different. But I'm still feeling like the pedagogy hasn't really shifted much from how they were teaching when we were in school versus the students that they're dealing with today. And it's
Yeah.
a little bit like, who's going to kind of carry the mantle? Who's going to be the champion of that sort of teaching that has to happen? Or are we going to wait until we get a generation that can't really do much? And they're like, oh, maybe we need to kind of backtrack this and go back to our schools and teach things differently. I just wonder, like,
Yeah.
how are we going to right the ship, for lack of a better term?
Right.
Because I
Well,
don't think it's happening,
no, you're
really.
going to the wrong port. Yeah. And the thing is we really need we need to recalibrate the purpose of schools. And
Mm,
unfortunately for schools, because you're right, it is the slowest moving system. But unfortunately, AI is coming quick.
yeah,
When you
it's here.
Yeah, it's here. And when you
Coming.
Yep, and when you think about, like, originally the purpose of schools was like be a renaissance man, know a little bit about everything, right? But that was because information wasn't readily accessible.
Right.
Well, now it is. So then the purpose shifted to career pathways. And so we're all on the career pathways. However, we didn't give up the content transfer,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So now we've got content transfer and we have career pathways, and it's all about this academic and technical credentialing. But the problem is with AI, nobody knows what job pathways are going to look like. So all that work on career pathways, we have
Yeah.
so many kids that are in certification programs right now for jobs they will never have because they won't
Right. Because they won't exist.
play. So we need to really recalibrate, like, what is our purpose? And what I would argue is our purpose is to teach kids to be humans,
Right.
to teach them to engage, to retain the humanity piece, because if we're just teaching them to be less than ideal computers that can spit out content and algorithms, we're never going to win.
We are not going to win. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness, so much to think about. So, but let's switch gears a little bit. So, your latest book that just came out, Aspirations to Operations, focuses on moving from visual to actual implementation. So, which is such a common struggle in our field. We
Yeah.
know what we want to do, just talking about, like, we know that we've got to do some things differently in terms of how we're teaching students, but getting there is hard. So, what's your framework for making that transition?
So I created, so the framework I talk about in the book is based on the work that I've done. So everything in that book is tactics that I've used with school leaders and leaders outside of the educational setting. But
Uh-huh.
essentially, I talk about, again, the human system, right?
Yep.
People are human. So how do we move humans and engage them? And the first C is really culture, right? Like, do you have a culture where people feel safe to
Mm-hmm.
promote ideas, to take risks, to try things? And so it goes through a whole bunch of things about how to build a more inclusive culture where people feel lifted up. Then you go into three planning C's. It's clarity. And this is
Mm-hmm.
a big one. And I always tell this story because it's funny. It's funny, not funny. But I was
Okay.
doing a strategic plan with a district, and we were talking about, okay, how are we going to monitor implementation of the plan? And I said to them, what's your instructional approach? And they said, we're
Okay.
UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And I was like, okay,
Okay.
great. So what do you see and what do you hear when a teacher is like UDLing it out of the ballpark? Not one administrator could answer that question from anybody.
Uh-oh.
So I said, well, let's go ask the teachers what they think. And the teachers said, oh, yeah, is that pillar thing we did like 2 or 3
Oh
years?
no.
And the superintendent was like, you have to be kidding me. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on this. And I said, but you never gave them clarity. You didn't give
Yeah.
them clarity of what it looks like, and you didn't monitor that. And so
Hmm.
we missed that clarity piece. And that's why the book is called Aspirations to Operations, because we have these ideas. Like, I've worked with a school that wants to do personalized learning. What do you
Hmm.
see and hear when you're doing that, right? Like, define it, because everybody
Yeah,
has a different definition. And I was actually at a
exactly.
school last week, and we were talking about these thinking skills that students need in the post AI world. So I had
Uh-huh.
said to the high school team, I said, okay, well, let's spend today defining critical thinking. In
Okay.
2 hours, they could not come up with a definition.
Oh gosh.
And so I'm like, okay, so we don't know what it is. We have no measurement tool to help us understand what it looks like when you're approaching expectations or meeting expectations. So how are you thinking we're ever going to get there? And
Right.
that's so common in schools. So that clarity is really important. Then the next planning C is coherence. And I see this
Hmm.
all the time, like, hey, we want personalized learning and we just got new curriculum and it's direct instruction. So it's like now teachers are going to fail either way because they can't do both. So
Right.
really understanding how you're making coherence and building on the strengths that you've used in the past. And then the third one is cadence. And, people are resistant to change. So I have
Yes.
people do kind of an attitude aptitude matrix and talk about like support needs to look different. We need to differentiate for people too, right? Not just for kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Those are sort of the planning C's. And then there's two C's that are engagement C's, where I talk about the brain science behind behavior and perceptions, and how does that inform the way we set up collaboration and the way we
Mm,
set up coaching. Because a really
I love
good coach will be able to give constructive feedback and a person walks out empowered, not walking out angry or deflated.
or shame or fill
Shame,
in the blank.
exactly. And then the last two C's are sustainability. So it's communication and celebration. And I
Got it.
think celebration is way underrated. And
Mm,
I did my doctoral work when I did my dissertation was on leadership, and I created an instrument. And one of the things I was studying was different characteristics of like high expectations that principals have. And what
yeah.
was interesting was it divided into two very distinct factors. And one was high expectations and the other was celebrations.
Celebration. Oh,
And
I love
so,
that.
and I see a lot of like inauthentic celebrations. Everybody's doing a great job. Our teachers work so hard. Well,
Yeah.
I'm down the hall from Mrs. So and so, and she's not working at all. And so really connecting your celebrations to your expectations so that it serves as a vehicle to build collective efficacy on your staff. And so it kind of starts with culture, but then all these other C's are the mechanisms that you live your culture. Because a lot of schools, it's like culture is not words, it's action.
It's action. Absolutely.
We spend a lot of money on
Absolutely.
shirts and mugs, but we don't really strategically think about how are we living this culture and truly making it the culture and not the aspiration.
Yep. How are we doing the thing? So
Yep.
important.
Yep.
And so, oh my gosh, Lisa, we've covered so much ground today already in this short period of time. But and someone's listening to this and thinking, I want to start incorporating brain science into my work tomorrow. They're like, oh, this seems a lot, very overwhelming. Where should they begin? What's one simple, actionable step they can take?
I think that the most important thing is positivity. We need
Okay.
to be intentional about positivity. We need to be looking at our classrooms as how do we create our classroom as this safe bubble so that when kids walk in, they all this sensory data their brain is getting is associated with good things, with a sense of
Mm,
self, with a sense of ability and growth, as opposed to I have to get this paperwork done. I have to turn it in. I have to get this great, instead of pressure. And
yes.
so if they can put a lens on and look at how they set up their classrooms, like I talk about setting them up like a learning community. And
Hmm.
it's not about just getting the work done. It's about learning how to be in a community with a common shared purpose. And in a classroom, the common shared purpose is learning. And so,
Right.
in my book, NeuroWell, like, so for teachers, like NeuroWell kind of, it gives you everything you need. It gives you the brain science, and then it gives you actionable things that have worked in schools, and just taking little bite-sized chunks to try to start doing some things. And then the aspirations to operations is sort of how do we move the system. Um,
Gotcha.
but one thing I can tell that's a like quick, easy nugget is this has
Uh-huh.
had one of the biggest impacts in classrooms is I teach teachers to do what's called learning sprints. And so
Okay.
you take what you do already, and most curriculums divide it up. This will take 10 minutes, this will take 20 minutes. But what you do in the classroom is you put on the board, you say, okay, we're going to do during this period, we're going to do 3 learning sprints today. The first one's 10 minutes long, and you put a timer up and you say,
Okay.
okay, during this 10-minute sprint, everybody's going to be working independently. So I shouldn't hear talking. Everybody should be focused on their work. If you have a
Yep.
question, you can do this, whatever. And
Hmm.
then you have that timer going. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, you have a 2-minute brain break. And that brain break, I could say, hey, turn to the person sitting next to you and pay him a compliment. Turn and
Yeah.
share what's one thing you love about yourself. Turn and share what's one thing you're proud of. What's one good thing that happened today? So you start to infuse, you force the brain to look for good things that are happening.
Oh,
And
I
so
like that.
you notice it. And then you go to the next learning sprint and you say, okay, now this one's a little longer. We're going to do 15 minutes. You're going to be in groups. Here's the expectations for groups. And then and so it chunks it, and it teaches the kids. First of all, it infuses some positivity, but the other thing it does is it teaches some of those executive functions around planning and organizing, time management, task management, being able to focus and then transition focus and then focus back. And it's so easy to implement. It doesn't require replanning or anything. It really just requires a timer. And kids love it because they don't end up in the never ending, oh my God, this class is 50 minutes long and it's the
Yeah.
rest of
Oh
my
my
night.
gosh. Yeah.
When you think about, like, if you're trying to get fit and you're at the gym and you're on a treadmill, if I said, all right, you got to run on this treadmill for 45 minutes, you're on there and you feel like you've been on there for 3 days and you look down and it's been
It's
three
been
minutes.
3 minutes.
Right.
Yes.
But if I say, all right, we're going to do 5 minutes on the treadmill, and then you can decide if you can do another 5 minutes. You get
Right.
through the 5 minutes and you go, oh, I did that. So you're like, I can do another five. And you will end up oftentimes doing more than what you would have done if you had done the big chunk.
Chunks, yeah, just taking in small, manageable pieces, right?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's so important in thinking about making change or moving the needle in any situation.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
Lisa,
even
what
in
keep?
PD, think about PD with teachers. If
Yeah,
they sit all day long and just get, what do? They start talking. They start
exactly.
we are all the same in that way. So it's just adapting your structure and your routines to what we know about the human brain. We need to talk.
Absolutely. And so, and we know this about people in general, but yet and still, we still have folks who, this is kind of how their comfort zone or how they like to impart information and stuff. Like if you can't sit there for 50 minutes, and some of these schools now have blocks of 110 minutes and like all these sorts of, if you can't do it, how are we expecting adolescents to be able to do
Yeah,
that? And so thinking about how you kind of manage your classroom in that way, I think is super
right.
important. I love the sprints. I think that's a great
Yeah,
idea.
and it's super easy. It's a super easy high impact strategy, and it
Yeah.
works.
Well,
Yep.
there you go. So, Lisa, what keeps you energized and passionate about this work?
Well, I just am I love educated people. And I think that being educated enriches your life. It teaches you to look at things differently, to relate to people differently. And I just feel so saddened by the fact that I feel like schools have stripped so much of that away,
Mm,
just teach concepts and curriculum. And they've moved away from having school become a place where people learn how to ask questions and be a community. And so I feel just such a passion for the gap that I see. And then I think the other thing that keeps me so energized is like converting to a neuro well culture. It's not
hmm
hard. It's not hard. Like nothing I teach is hard. It's
Right.
literally just a matter of changing your mindset and then aligning your practices. And a lot of times teachers are already doing pieces and parts to this. Like a lot of teachers will say, well, I already have my curriculum divided up. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not sharing that with the students. The
Mm,
power of the learning sprint is the timer because they
yes.
see I only have 3 more minutes that I have to focus. I can do this,
Yeah,
right?
I can do it. Yep.
So it's like little things like that that can make a humongous impact on the engagement in your classroom.
I love that. And so we've talked a bit about your new book, Aspirations to Operations, but what do you hope readers take away from it?
Well, each chapter, at the end of the chapter, I have a stop and think. And I suggest in the introduction that as they read it, take your time and
Mm,
really think about those questions because building this stuff starts with self-awareness on our own end. And
yeah.
so my hope is that as people read it, they will gain some self-reflection in it. And then they'll also have all the tools they need to operationalize it if they actually go through and take the time to read it, listen to, okay, here's how she's suggesting I do it. This is
hmm
how I'm going to do it. And really try to use it as a guidebook and move, let it be a vehicle to help you actually move so that the transformation happens and then sticks.
Got it. Awesome. And so, Lisa, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you think is really important for our listeners to know or think about as they look to build more inclusive, brain-friendly communities?
I think the only other thing I would say that I talk a lot about with teachers is the power of letting kids fail.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that if we set our classrooms up where kids are able to experiment. So, for example, I was in a science classroom in a middle school. And instead of going, because I think teachers feel like they need to teach everything before they can set the kids loose on it. And I say,
Yeah.
flip that around because you'll save time by doing that. So
Mm.
this teacher was teaching electrical circuits, and they were supposed to have already had it in earlier grades. So I said, instead of giving them a pretest that was essentially a vocabulary test, put some light bulbs on a table and some wires and some circuits and make it a challenge and say, you got 5 minutes, see if you can figure out how to turn this thing on, and let the kids experiment and fail and celebrate that. And so once they've tried it, then you can say, okay, after 5 minutes, you can say, okay, what did your group try? Okay, you hooked this wire to this wire. I'm so glad you did that because that's a common misconception. Let's talk about why and create a T-chart. So you're sharing the learning experience and you're learning through the faulty thinking. And
Yeah,
we teach so much in a way that there's a right way. And so
exactly.
learn the process, but they don't understand why the process works. So opening up where failing is fun. We get to try
Hmm.
things, doing some inquiry learning, let kids experiment, let them try 4 or 5 different things and then say that didn't work. Why didn't that work? And I'm so glad you tried it because now we know why it doesn't work.
Now we know. I know. I love that. And just being able to do some things with your hands and getting up and moving around and not
Mhm.
just kind of sitting there listening to the teacher talk about the pieces that are there. I think it's so powerful as well. I think that's really, at least for me, I learn better that way when I'm
Yeah.
actually doing and experimenting. And
Yeah.
so I think that makes class a little more exciting.
Right. And then kids can't hide because everybody's sitting
Right.
active. And the other thing is I hear teachers say all the time, these kids can't persist through a struggle. The minute they don't know it, they shut down. And I'm like, because they don't know how, because they
Hmm.
haven't had that experience. And if your classroom is set up of I give you information and you either fail or succeed at giving it back to me, then you haven't given them a context where
Right.
that's celebrated and okay. And
Yeah,
so
they're not exercising that muscle.
no, they are not. From a biology standpoint, our body has 4 states of awake. So you have like
Mhm.
calm, alert, alarm, and fear. And so alert happens like before a job interview or before a sporting match or something. You get that little bit of juice. Like you want
Uh-huh.
the alert state in your class where kids are like, ooh, I don't know what
Ooh,
I'm
what's going on? Yeah.
but they're not paralyzed by it. And then,
Right.
but what I see today is kids don't know how to go from calm to alert. They go calm to
Mm,
alarm and they shut down. But why is that? Because they don't practice it. So learning should be that chance for them to explore and practice those things. And what happens then too is they learn it deeper and they retain
right.
it and it goes faster.
It goes, I love that. Learning should be a chance to explore and practice. I think, and learning in life, not just in the classroom. So
That's
that's my
right.
takeaway for today. So, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
This conversation about brain science and creating neural cultures, I think is exactly what the kind of practical, transformative work our listeners need to hear and think about. If you want to learn more about Lisa's work, you can find both her books, Neurowell and Aspirations to Operations, wherever books are sold. I think that's correct. Is that correct? Wherever books are sold, can you
they're on
find?
Amazon. Yeah,
Okay,
Amazon's the primary vehicle.
excellent. And we'll also include links to Lisa's resources in our show notes. And we have some exciting news to share. The Dean's Roundtable is now on Instagram and TikTok. Follow us for leadership insights, community building resources, and conversations that matter to student life professionals. Just search for Dean's Roundtable on both platforms and join the conversation. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone in your network who's working to build communities where everyone belongs. As always, thanks for pulling up a chair at the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe even something to try out in your own community. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time at the table.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table Podcast Series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Lisa Riegel. Produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.